Hey, and welcome back to another Twinmotion video. In this video, we're going to look at 2022.2. This is not just the preview because it is fully released, baby. Good release, like it. A bit of the few changes since the preview, and well, the two previews, in fact. And so we're going to cover all those in this video, so do not worry at all. We will cover them for sure. Okay, before we get into it, if at any point in this video you happen to learn something, which, come on, why are you here? I hope you do anyways. Please demolish that like button. It helps me out so much. Also, please subscribe to that if you really enjoy this kind of content. Always uploading twice a week. Okay, getting into it now. I'm going to pull over all the new features here, and I'm not going to cover this entire article, but I'm going to cover everything in the article. Obviously, we have the new release. It's really exciting. It's cool. We've got some great new stuff. Obviously, a few things I'm going to cover here just because it's real easy to quick hit, boom. First of all is rendering enhancements. Easy stuff here because, of course, there are 258 new HDRI environments and 30 new studios. So like if you're doing some sort of a product as opposed to like a true scene, then this is totally up your alley. You're going to want to start using Twinmotion. Obviously, we know why they would want to do this because all of a sudden it appeals to more than just people in the AEC industry, more than the gaming industry. You just want to actually have a product that you have in a scene, a studio scene, and you're trying to sell and render that product. So if I pull this over here, we can see, if I pull out the tab, we have kind of everything else that we're used to seeing, except look, HDR environments now. Ooh, this looks cool. It's great. So what we see before is skies, and this was only skies, if you remember in the last update. So if I click on skies, it is everything we're used to seeing. It's all the different types of HDRI skies. It's everything we're used to seeing. Okay, great. With that said, I now have these indoor, outdoor, and studio environments. And these environments are not just the sky, so don't think of it as the sky, but think of it as the entire environment. So if I click on outdoor, let's just choose one because, heck, we want to actually get started with this. And look, these are true full scenes, and there's a ton of them, which is awesome. So just know it's not just the skies. Obviously, we're bringing in the entire environment. Of course, you get everything that is 360 in this specific shot. Of course, that does include the sky, so it's basically a sky plus an environment if you want to think about it that way, which is really great. So let's go ahead and pick one of these that might make sense for our environment. And really anything will work, of course, because I'm just working in a blank scene. So let's go ahead and take this Signal Hill Dawn. Obviously it's going to take a bit to download, and once it downloads, we will be right back. All right, and with this downloaded, you see it's downloaded, and we can click and drag it in here. But if I don't want to do this, something else I can do is just simply drop it in like we would a sky or in some sort of environment like that, like what we used to work with, which is just the skies. We can drop it in the exact same place, which is wonderful. So with this actually imported, I'm taking here, which is settings, lighting, and then this actual sky, HDRI sky. And it's not just the sky. Obviously, it's the full environment, which is great. But we have some options here, whether we want to deal with the intensity, and the intensity is just the lighting. So know that it is just the lighting. So you can clearly see we have some funny looking things going on here. So obviously the scale of our current model in Twinmotion by default doesn't quite match the scale because we can see a bench here in the background and the buildings in the background. So just things to know. But with all the backgrounds we're used to using in Twinmotion, we can rotate this. And this also affects the sun, if you're, just so you know that. And we have smog on and off. So real simple stuff. Obviously, with more intensity, we can change whether the fact we want to match the sun or not, which is really cool. Or we can turn these HDRI effects lighting on or off. So basically, do we want this new environment to affect the lighting at all? And not just lighting, but the sun. We have two different options here, which is cool. And then overall ambient, which is really great to be able to adjust there. So besides that, obviously, the rotation, but you can see where it is. If I come back out to lighting, again, this is exactly where I would turn on or apply a true sky environment. So in this case, let's go back to skies and just go ahead and place one of these here, because maybe we want to actually replace this. And so obviously we would want to replace it here, But look at this. We could literally choose a dynamic sky or a skylight HDRI or a backdrop HDRI. Clicking on dynamic sky takes me back to just the basic Twinmotion sky that we're all used to. Of course, changing this to skylight HDRI is exactly what we were just looking at, which is where it takes that entire HDRI and plugs it into like the actual full background. But finally, we have the backdrop HDRI, and that compresses everything down that we had in that new HDRI into a specific scene, a specific place, and this is just a backdrop. So the interesting thing about this is that you can't select or anything, but you can fully come into this scene, and so it's in a way of working with this full 360 without having to deal with the ground, the other sky, whatever. So there might be an application for this. We will cover that in a separate video when we go into this specific tool a little bit more. Okay, so cool. So finally, if we come back here to our lovely article, we can see that we can now render very high resolution images, and not only images but videos up to 64K. I mean, my gosh, we're barely pushing 8K now, much less the standard 4K that we're used to working with. So maybe what I want to do just for this scene is decide, for the location, I'm just going to turn this background off. It makes the most sense because we can really work with this scene that we actually have as our background. Okay. And so with that, I'm going to come in here and let's say we make an image and we're totally happy with this. Looks great. Now I'm going to come to the format and we can see, what do we want to do? Well, I can choose, of course, any one of these. Also, we have this lovely tiled rendering. And if you're used to like rendering in the older days from just your computer, basically if you're older than 20, you probably understand this, then you know what this is like. Basically, tile, if you work with 3ds Max, anything like that, it's going to render per tile, and these tiles are determine the resolution and so on. So if we look at this, we can see it enables or disables the higher resolution exports at a lower GPU cost, video card cost, which is great. Although the limitations exist with screen space effects, including our screen space reflection, ambient occlusion, lens flare. So basically, you're losing some of the extra effects if you go through this way, but it will allow you to actually export higher quality images with lesser video cards, which is really nice. Now, I wouldn't necessarily want to put this on by default, but it's cool. And of course, besides a custom resolution that goes up to 16K, we can literally choose a 16K if we want, which is great. Kind of ridiculous, but we can do it. Great to see that. Okay, this is a giant update, and this is Sketchfab Integration. So if you're familiar with Sketchfab, it's basically just another place on the internet that you can download 3D models that are in a wide variety of formats. I've avoided this just because a lot of them aren't free. A lot of them may not be in the format I'm looking for, and it's just hard to import them, especially into Revit. My gosh, just don't even ask me about doing that. But besides that, I might try to get them imported into Rhino or something like that accepts essentially every program or every file type format. But besides that, I've avoided Sketchfab. Now, this is fantastic because Twinmotion, not necessarily Twinmotion, but Unreal, Epic Games has acquired Sketchfab when it comes to the integration side. So with this, that means we have Sketchfab directly into Twinmotion, which is fantastic. So what does this really mean for us? Well, if you're familiar with Quixel, which has been in Twinmotion for over a year now, it's basically a bunch of different models, but we really love Quixel for all of their surfaces or materials. And so that's an easy way to import, download, and then apply those materials into the project. So Sketchfab is, you're going to think of it as the exact same thing, except is with models, any sort of models. Now, I will say I'm not a huge fan of what they offer, just because I'm an architect. I'm trying to build a scene that's, let's say, not gamified. A lot of their objects are game-oriented objects, and you'll see it here. If we come to our library, we can see there's a whole new button dedicated to Sketchfab, which is cool. Now, first I'm going to go to Quixel and 3D assets, and we can see all these different kinds of assets that we can work with here. And you can see, yeah, we can basically download these and drag them in. And so going back to Sketchfab, it's going to work the exact same way. Sketchfab, there's tons of different types of things here. Now, you'll quickly know that these things are a little bit overblown. Now, I like even the architecture tab. Like, this is clearly, there's a lot going on here. Like, do I want an entire church? Maybe I don't, but you can clearly see that these are a bit more oriented towards games and building game scenes and things like that, which, don't get me wrong, is awesome. And I'll use some of these things for sure. Just quickly going through here, some of the things I will work with is some of these things in furniture and home. Like, look, a table. This is a real basic table. Obviously, this is a very highly detailed table. But things like this entire billiards room, maybe I want this. Maybe I just want the billiards table. I don't know. Things like that. There's random chairs and these things can be cool, but here's a great example. I will probably need a couch in every single architecture scene I build, but I don't want this couch. And for obvious reasons, do you want a client seeing this couch in your scene? That's for like a new build or even a renovation for that matter. Probably not, but you can clearly see these are awesome. These are really great assets to have and be able to work with. I will say overall, they're probably hit or miss, but the great thing is we can search. Of course, we can always search. Now, something I did find, and I'm using this as an example. It's really nothing crazy, but I've got a food or drink, and I've actually already downloaded these 20 liquor bottles. So I'm going to drag these in. So these are coming in like giant. And while I don't care about the scale so much, I want to actually change it because it will make a little more sense. So to transform here, obviously we can see, the size is just absolutely giant. So let's put these at like 1 foot. It would make more sense. And so pressing F, I can come in here. And these are more of the size of liquor bottles we would expect to see in the real world. Cool. With that said, what do we have here to work with? Well, it's literally the name. We can see we have that nice Sketchfab icon that tells you what it is. It's literally a Sketchfab model, which is great. Some other things that we want to inspect, just to get an idea of what we're working with, is we can look at the material. So this material happens to be, you can see I've already brought this in. It happens to be one material for everything. And so I noticed some errors here. And so this is kind of a testament to the Sketchfab models. They're not going to come in perfect. And the one you want may not be one you want to use because of something like this. We can see some of these clear glass, it's basically 100% transparent. And there's no real way to edit that unless you were able to edit this kind of full texture of all of the bottles. That's a bit difficult to me and kind of not something I'm looking to do. So with that said, maybe what we want to do is come over to materials and glass, and what I would want to do is apply like a two-sided material glass to something like this so it's not clear. Well, you can see what it does. It does clean that up, but it applies that material to absolutely everything in the scene, even when I have apply that to the specific object. So the thing to be aware of with Sketchfab is that 99% of the time, basically everything I've imported has been just one single object. You drag and drop, it's one object. I've had better results with Quixel models. It comes in bulk as multiple objects, so that's good. I will say Twinmotion is fantastic about that. If it's an actual Twinmotion material or Twinmotion object, then it will be split up into individual objects, which is totally great. We'll get into why that's important later. So with that said, do I want to deal with this? No, but it's okay. But something I want to do is I can inspect this, and something I can get to get it a little closer. I can turn this on two-sided, and you can see it does help in some of those circumstances. Obviously, maybe I want to move a little slower so I can actually move around here appropriately. So we can see, yeah, this does end up helping in some of these cases, but coming to the second one doesn't do as much. So it's kind of up to you whether you want to deal with that or not. So obviously something else to be aware of. So Sketchfab, it's brand new integration into Twinmotion, and it works just like Quixel in that we have all these types of things that we can download. Honestly, too many things, if I had to be honest. More are things that I don't want to use because I'm not making games. I'm working with architecture and presenting not necessarily perfect projects, but not gamified. That's the only issue I have with it, but nonetheless, awesome stuff. I wish there were a way to, let's say if I wanted one of these bottles, or if I wanted just that billiards table out of the billiards scene, if I could cut it down to just that. Well, we'll get there, I hope, but nonetheless, we're dealing with this as it is, as one solid object. Okay, totally fine, but really cool stuff. Okay, coming back here, we can see we have a physics-based asset placement. So because I'm just apparently a teenager still, I love this kind of a thing. And basically what is this? This is applying collision and gravity. And so just looking at this video, it's taking all these individual objects, which are these chess pieces, and applying gravity to them. So they fall where they may. And this is totally awesome, totally fun. And I can see this being used a little more in the architecture industry, because this could be something that gives your scene a little more personality, and not just personality, but some like unique character. Because another example that I've seen Twinmotion videos use showing off this product is they just drop individual coffee beans just kind of everywhere to place this beautiful looking scene where you just have some leftover coffee beans on the table, and it gives it some more realism. Not that you would just have coffee beans floating around all over the place, but this is literally real in that gravity exists. And it's like, hello. So what can we do with this? Well, is there a great application for it? Maybe. I'll make a separate video on the gravity because it's fun nonetheless. It does open opportunities, because there might be reasons you want to have something fall, or just literally enact gravity. With that, I will say there's probably more of a chance that I'll use the true collision side of things, because when it comes to modeling things and placing objects, we want to worry about collision because it exists. Collision's real along with gravity, but collision means I'm going to hit, I'm going to run into it. And so the interesting thing is that we now have different transform options. Not necessarily different, but they change in a bit, because now if we look here, we can see I can move this with collision. And so that's a toggle, whether it's moved with collision or not. And so whenever I move this with collision and then toggle this on, you can see that my three transform tools, my move, my rotate, and my scale, all acquire these two little slashes. And you can think of these two little lines or slashes as a way of something hitting something else, collision. So that's something to be aware of. If you see those, you're going to move that object with collision. What we want to do is, let's say I bring in just a random chair. If I bring this chair in and I place this, and I have these bottles moving with collision, let's go ahead and bring them up. If I want to move it to where these bottles are like literally hitting the chair, you can see what happens. I cannot move these bottles through the chair, and that's because I'm moving them with collision. Now, if I decide to turn that off, you can see what I can do. I can literally move them through the chair, which is great. Now, if I do the same thing likewise with the chair, if I turn collision on for the chair, and I move these bottles, we can see that it also stops because they have collision on with the bottles. But let's move them now. Doesn't matter. If I click on the chair again, it's just a toggle, basically like a world toggle. So it's a matter of, do I want to move things with collision? Do I want to rotate or scale with collision? It's not like you're applying collision to an object, because to my knowledge, all of these objects have their own collision. So basically, if I'm walking around, I'm going to hit them. And so let's actually test that out, because I can put myself on the ground. Once I do that, obviously I'll go onto the ground and I'm moving. And as soon as I come up to the chair, I cannot move through the chair anymore. Same thing is with the bottles. If I hit the bottles, I stop moving. Collision, that type of thing. And I don't have collision on or anything like that. It's just moving or scaling or translating with collision. That's the thing to know. So really interesting. Now, when it comes to gravity, this is totally the fun part. This is the best thing in my mind with this update, because it's just so fascinating and fun. So if I move this up without gravity, then nothing happens. We haven't activated gravity. Now, I will say this is kind of a per object thing. So I can gravity, which has a shortcut of Shift X, and you can see it right here. It's literally the down arrow, very obvious. So if I press this, the chair falls. And not only does it fall, but it bounces as if gravity were truly applied. And the cool thing is I can then turn gravity off, and that's the way the chair is now, which is totally interesting and kind of crazy. So how would I reset that? Well, I can keep doing this, but it's as simple as undoing that, which is really great. Now, I'm going to expand my scene graph here, and we'll do the exact same thing with these bottles. moving these bottles up. I'm going to apply gravity. Prepare to be disappointed with these bottles, because as soon as I press this button, what you think or what you would hope would happen may not. So the bottles come down, and what are we working with here? Well, like I said before, these are all one object, which is both unfortunate and also not real. You know, they're each 20 bottles. Obviously, it's just one giant object, which is unfortunate. Again, so this is going to matter a lot whenever you start to apply and import objects. If you bring it all in as one object, if you want to apply gravity, then everything is going to be applied the same, just like that. Is that boring? Yes. Whatever. Also, you'll notice as soon as if I still have gravity on, I can click individual objects and they'll just fall from the sky. A gravity will be applied, which, I don't know, you choose whether that's cool or not. Now, whenever I do this with lights, it gets very interesting. This light will not fall. And same here, I apply gravity, this light, and this light. Lights will not fall, which is interesting. I guess it makes sense because it's not an object, it's a light, which, I don't know, I like that. It seems to make more sense, just like logically. So, great. So that is the gravity. Now, the cool thing is I can also select multiple objects if I want to select both of these liquor bottles and this chair and apply gravity all at once. And they will react however, which is very, very interesting. Now with that, let's get a little more interesting. Now, like I said before, if I take a Twinmotion object and maybe we've got home here, but here, if I'm in the toys and games that are in the home, there's obviously a ton here, but look at these blocks. So bringing these blocks in, obviously I need to download these. So once I download these blocks, this will be a great example of actual gravity. So I can drag these in, pull that in there, and once this loads up, I can show you the distinct difference here. Pulling both of these in, we can see, hey, obviously there is a folder, and these two folders not only have the name of what they are. If I zoom in here, I can see, yep, there's the blocks, and then there's blocks. But the crazy thing is, they each have all of these specific objects, and each specific object happens to be each one of the blocks. And there's obviously a ton of them. Thankfully, they come in folded. But again, tons of blocks. And so where does this come into play with gravity? Well, gravity works a bit differently whenever you have a ton of objects to work with. And that's awesome because this is what we would expect and this is what we would hope. Now you can see I would select them through the scene graph because clearly I selected each one. So clicking both of them, I can move them over here, move them up. And here's the fun part with gravity. If I turn gravity on with these objects and click them, that individual object is going to fall, which is super cool and really interesting. Now we can also get the starting ground to fall, and that's a bit of a mess because it will fall for eternity. So just be aware of that. Okay, so here's the fun part, obviously. What I can do is click this entire folder, and as soon as I press this gravity, they will all fall to the ground. At least you would think that, but whenever I click this gravity, we can come in here and we can obviously expand this and see them all, but if I zoom in all these, I need to click each individual object and it will all fall. Each one will fall to the ground individually while I have gravity turned on. Now this obviously can apply to other objects because I can click all of these objects and they will individually fall, which is really interesting the way they fall. Obviously they're stopping. So clicking on these there, we can see, yeah, cool. So what the heck? How do we get the entire object to fall at once? Well, that's a bit different. And just to show you how to do it, let's move these closer to the ground so we can see things actually as they happen. And so there's something that we want to be aware of. Obviously, if I again go to gravity, I can click individual objects and then they will fall. We know what that we know what that does. So how might I do this if I want all of these objects to fall at once? Well, this will involve first selecting all the objects, which you would think, selecting all objects, not the folder, but the actual objects. And then making sure that move with collision is turned on, because I can come in here and obviously I want to move it. Maybe you want to move it with collision. You can see even though I smashed onto the ground, they are moving with collision, which is really interesting. But all it takes at that point is that I have everything selected, and then I have move with collision, and then I just press the gravity, and then all falls. This is totally cool. And of course, if I want to do the exact same thing with this other object here, select all the objects, make sure move with collision is on, and then turn gravity on. And we can see everything falls down. This, I mean, my gosh, is this not the coolest thing ever? It just brings some more realism into the world. And I don't know, are there applications for this when it comes to the architecture world, creations, and everything? Like, yeah, maybe. Can you just imagine the fun we could have with a ball pit? Like, are you kidding me? Like, we might have to model a ball pit just for that. And so we'll deal with that later. But my gosh, look at this. Okay, so cool. That is gravity. Really cool stuff. So obviously gravity, cloud enhancement. There's quite a lot here. So the main thing I want to draw your attention to is the support for significantly more complex presentations. And this just means that they've increased the limits of the RAM usage by 4 times, which means you can use 4 times the more RAM you might have, because I don't work with a system that has under 32 gigs of RAM now, and I want to be able to use them as much as I can for Twinmotion. In this case, I can now. The same with VRAM, video card RAM. That is up by 1.5 times, which means you can utilize more of your graphics card to do these types of things, which is fantastic. Also, we have embed a presentation in an external website. This is fantastic. If you have an external website, which if you have a firm, own a firm, or if you just have your own website, you can upload these to your website and it works all the same. So look at this. I can press play and it will literally load this scene. I can enter the scene and this is where it will load. And then I can move around this in the website. This is totally crazy. And so this means I can do everything that I would do in a presentation, like having to send them a link, this or that. This is already in, this can be on your website or any website. And the cool thing is that in addition to that, dynamic QR codes are generated for all of these, so you can quickly send them out if you want to just send them to this specific place, which is totally cool. You have all the controls that you're kind of used to seeing. You can jump around from scenes, through scenes, across. You've got all kinds of settings, but if you don't want to worry about that and don't need to, you don't have to. You can still move around really easily and see everything in all of these scenes that you really want. This is the appeal here, really. Okay, so finally, increase productivity. This is cool. It's very small, but we can now import multiple files at once. Not that we necessarily need to, but I've come across certain things where I've got a direct link, and obviously I want to use a direct link there, but when it comes to geometry, I'll be able to select multiple objects at once to import them all. Totally great, totally easy to do. Cool. Really great. I can group multiple objects into a new container or select all referring instances of an object. Great stuff. This is like, it's kind of basic, but these are the really small things. So if I want to, maybe I've got all of these these imported objects, I can right click here and I can create subcontainer, which we've had. I can move to a new container or set active container. I love the move to new container. So what does that do? That literally does what you want. It moves it to a new folder, and we can just call this objects, but it's then a folder that is easily organized right there and done for you. And so maybe what I want to do is just copy this, something as simple as copy it around my scene. If I've got 5 of them now, well, let's go ahead and right click this, and I can select all instances, and that selects them all. And you'll notice not all of them are grouped like together. Obviously they're linked together, but they don't all fall in the same place in the scene graph, so it's totally great. And then I can simply isolate all of those instances so I can see all of that. So really great stuff to be able to do and navigate really quickly through all your objects and organize your scene quite well. Really nice stuff. So we've got the visualize and modify the XYZ values in the transform panel. So finally, if we want to look at these different transforms, we can find these, of course, under here in the transform. Now, the thing to be aware of is, obviously I can turn gravity on, but with the collision on, I can see all this is grayed out. So why is that? Well, it's because simply collision is on. And it's basically, if I had to sum it up, I would say this object is literally in the real world and you can't affect it. It's just like kind of set in stone. So that's what's going to happen whenever you have collision on. Turning that off means, okay, I can now edit it, which is cool. And so something that we apparently couldn't do before, which thankfully we can do now, is we can simply tab or shift tab to go to the next or back. We don't have to click and then enter, click, put in our value and enter. We have a lot more flexibility with simply how we enter data into the transform panel. Really great stuff. Okay, here. And then They've also added hotkeys for toggling between world and local axis, which is great. And so where can we see this? Well, we can see it here by pressing Z, and that makes perfect sense. We can see that we have a simple toggle going from local or world. Great stuff. And the same with orbiting around objects, which is cool. So I can just orbit by pressing and holding left click, and so I can press somewhere and I'll select something and I can orbit around this object, and this object is the starting ground. Now I can select this chair and I can zoom in here, and as long as I have the chair selected, I can literally orbit around this chair, which is really cool. This is really easy to do too. And of course, this isn't exactly new, but it's just really nice to be able to do this. Something else that's easy is that I can shift click. So if I click on this chair and then I shift click somewhere else, it'll be placed right there, which is really cool. I don't have to like try and drag it and then move it around. Now, obviously you can do that, but it's great to be able to do that. Okay. And finally, the XYZ, or let's say Gizmo, which I'm glad they're calling it that. The Gizmo is now colored. So the Z-axis is blue, and then the XY red and green. So cool. It just makes it a little easier to see and understand. So nice. Always like to see things like that. And so we can match other 3D software's navigation styles, and that is simply done by going to our navigation. This isn't exactly new, but apparently they have more options, which is great. We can go to our navigation, show navigation, and then we can choose all these different types of different applications that you're probably familiar with, whether it's the editor presentation or just every other program, which is cool. I've never changed it from Twinmotion because I've come to know how to use this so well and so easily, and so I'd recommend that. But if you just want to stick with your native program, it works all the same. You can do the same things with your native controls, which is great. And then finally, enhance, import, and export. Interesting. Right here. So it's now possible to import a model that is the GLTF format, or the GLB binary equivalent of that, which you might be like, what the heck is this? Well, these are primarily from Sketchfab. So if you have any other models that do include this format, that's where it's going to come from. And it's just cool because you can now import that with, you don't have to worry about it at all. So it comes in just like you would expect. Now, what I have seen, and I haven't really needed to use them at all in the past, but most of these formats are used for augmented reality. So if that tells you anything about where Twinmotion is going, I'm even more excited, because having Unreal and Twinmotion deal with augmented reality, we know Unreal can do it, but the fact that Twinmotion has this import option is a step in the right direction for that. And then finally, we have export images as Panorama, of course, JPEG and EXR formats. We covered this in the preview, and I would highly, highly recommend that you look at the EXR export video that I made, because it gives you all the information that you might need about why you'd want to export as an EXR, but just what it is, which is really cool. And so this is really interesting, and I love this, and we're going to look at this right now because I'm so excited about this. I don't know why this is just like deep down here, but it really is cool. And so lights in Datasmith scenes. So basically, if you import objects through Datasmith, which I hope you do, let's be honest, that's the best way to do it. This direct link here, it's going to take your actual Revit model and direct link the Revit model. Totally the way you should do it. You should not, I'm not saying you can't or you shouldn't, but I would recommend that you don't simply import at basic geometry, like your whole model as geometry. That's just my opinion, and that, whatever. That's for another video and another rant. But lights that you import through Datasmith are now imported as Twinmotion lights. Guys, this is amazing. This is totally amazing. Now, it's not amazing yet because we haven't really looked at it, because it could be not what we want it to be, but visually distinguish between different light types in the scene graph. Is this not everything we wanted and hoped with lights? Because where were we before? Well, before we would bring in all of our lights from Revit or whatever, and they wouldn't translate to Twinmotion lights. You'd have to add in these light sources all over the place. Now, I'm not saying that problem is solved, but we do need to go through and check this out. So I'm going to go to direct link. I'm going to link all of this in, light settings. This is totally awesome. We can use our original settings. Basically, it's pulling the settings from our Revit file, or we can set values to the Twinmotion default. I want to do that. I just feel more comfortable with that. And then I want to make sure this is keep hierarchy, so we actually have individual lights as opposed to by material. Cool. So let's go ahead and import this. So that's there. I'm now going to go to Revit and then simply go to Datasmith and synchronize. Oh baby, I'm excited and I have very high hopes for this. And once this is imported, I will show you what we get. All right, and here is our house. And of course, what do I see? I'm already excited because I see actual lights. If you remember from previous versions of Twinmotion, we didn't have this. We didn't have the lights coming in as actual lights, as Twinmotion lights. So we'd have to place light sources ourselves. And we had to go through replacing objects with light sources to get those placed strategically. And it was such a mess. Now, all of a sudden, we have the option of importing just how we normally would with the direct link. And all of a sudden, our lights appear. And you can choose how they come in, which is totally great. Again, I'm going to save that for a future video to look at this specifically. But look at this. My whole scene is lit. It's an awful model, so don't just... The lights that you see are more based on the model and the crappy model than the fact that they are lights. They're Twinmotion lights. So let's expand the scene graph and see what we have to work with. Okay, don't want to see this. Don't care about these toys or anything like that. So we have this house, and there's a ton going on here. So what I'm going to do is specifically select one of these lights. And look at this. Not only do I have the light itself, but I have a light source. Guys, this is so stupid. It's so awesome. And it's so great because you can see I have every option with this light source as if it were, you know, straight out of Twinmotion, because literally it is. It's replacing those Revit lights with not only, you know, just the geometry of the light itself, but it's applying a light source to it, which is amazing. Amazing. This makes for working with models so much easier, and lights. Oh, this is fantastic. I cannot tell you how excited I am about this. This is the biggest change yet. In this alone, I think, will set Twinmotion apart from everything else, this is so great. Okay, so you can see I'm excited. Like, obviously this is ridiculous. So, and along with all of the ways that we can, you know, select all of these, I'm going to take this light, for example, and then select all instances. And then I can simply isolate this, and I'm off to the races, which means that I can just deal with what these lights look like. I have all of these light sources that I can immediately work with. It's totally great. This is totally great. I'm so excited for this. And the opportunities with this are just endless. You know, the amount that we just gained in productivity from having this in Twinmotion by default now is immeasurable, because the amount of time it would take to add lights individually is crazy. And so, not even crazy, just replacing objects with light sources was a pain in of itself. And believe me, the crashes I went through to try to get that to work was ridiculous. But now this works, and I can just simply go to these lights individually and say, well, you know, I don't want this to be this kind of light. I can simply replace that light individually if I want it to be a different kind of light, or I can select them all, I can link them together and then just change them globally. There's a ton that we can do here, and I'm so excited for this. Like, I cannot tell you enough. Okay, cool. I need to settle down now. Performance and scalability enhancements. This is probably pretty small, but 75% texture memory saving, which, woo, that's crazy. So any texture that you apply, it's going to take 75% less memory, which is totally great, which means you can apply so many more textures, you can apply more objects to your scene without it really affecting your performance. Amazing. Manage your VRAM usage. Really interesting. So we come over here to our dandy statistics. We can see, yeah, we got our frames, we have our GPU percentage, CPU percentage, all of this. So the great thing is that we will obviously be able to manage our VRAM usage, but we'll have varying levels of notifications indicated by a non-blocking warning that have different levels of notification at 60, 70, 80, 90%. And we can find those in the statistics panel. Really cool. And then support for handling smaller scenes. So if you you can probably make sense of this based on a number of the new features in Twinmotion 2022.2, but we can make smaller scenes. And so we have different units like centimeters. We don't just have feet and meters like we used to have, which, you know, that's not necessarily something I care about. But if you can see here, we've got centimeters, inches, feet, meters we've always had. This is great because I can literally make a smaller scene that's dedicated to a specific product in this case. And along with that, of course, we have all of the different types of environments, whether it's a studio environment or a large environment if we want a real large environment, but the studio is totally meant for that. You can see all these different studio environments if we want to work on just a specific product, which is great. And so with that, we can, of course, change the scale or the units, but the inspect speed can also go down to 1, basically 1 through 6. You can press the 1 through 6 on your keyboard, but we can see here that this is going to allow for smaller scenes as well. The speed goes from, of course, flying to literally inspecting. So I'm moving just forward, and it's so small and so short, which is great for these really small scenes. I don't like it because I'm not in small scenes all the time, but it's great that we now have the flexibility. And so with that said, there's a near clipping value in the camera settings. And this is really important because if you get up to an object, you're going to lose sight of that object whenever we're looking in like a camera mode, image mode. So coming down here, I want to actually go to my objects here. And let's say we want to bring this camera up to look at this light really particularly. Now, if I get in here, you can see that I'm literally cutting off some of the light itself because of where the quote camera is. Now, I don't like that at all, but Twinmotion has a solution to that. So we come into the camera, we can see this near clipping, and so it's set by default to 0.03 feet. Now, I'm really bad at math, but that's way, way, way less than an inch, obviously. It's less than an inch, so there's the clipping that we're basically used to seeing, and so that's my default. And I can bring this down to 0.003 feet, so you could call it nothing. It rounds down to nothing. So basically the camera will see everything that it's looking at, and it's not going to start cutting through things yet. Now, as I change this value, we can see that the near clipping is changed, and so it's almost like I'm making a section cut of, with the camera. It's kind of a funny way of putting it, but you can literally see it working just like that. And of course, it can go really far, and it doesn't apply to just that one light or that one object. It applies to everything. So you can see I'm cutting this window, and once I get to a point where I'm too far, I can just pull it in. Regardless, if you ever had any clipping issues with Twinmotion objects before, you won't anymore, because you can bring this down to near nothing, which is totally cool. And I can see myself using it more for that, bringing it down to basically nothing rather than getting a specific clipping. Now, maybe I do want to clip some things out. That's exactly how you do it. So really cool, easy to use, and creates more possibilities when it comes to specific scenes. I love it. So man, guys, I don't know. I'm really excited about this. 2020.2 adds support for Windows 11 and Mac OS Monterey. Cool. If you're using Mac or even 11, I'm not using 11 yet. It works. I love this. There is so much here. I'm going to leave a link to this in the description, but that's going to do it for us. My gosh, guys, I cannot tell you how excited I am about this new update. I know this was a long video, but I hope that you learned something from it. I hope you gained some value from it. If you did, please demolish that like button. It tells me that you might have learned something or just liked it. Also, subscribe. It does help as well. And definitely expect future videos on all of these new features individually, because we have a lot more to cover when it comes to the specifics of them. Gravity, the different HDRI environments, things like that. There's a lot that we can look at and that really do deserve a little more advanced look at individually. So thank you very much for spending the time with me and in this video learning about everything new with 2022.2, because there's some awesome stuff, particularly the lights. Amazing. So I will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day, and thank you very much for watching.